Welcome to Familiar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. Here we talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old. So grab your talking cap and transform into some comfy clothes as we step into a familiar territory. My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Today we have a highly topical and timely discussion prepared. This is something that it's here, it's fresh. We want to talk about it. While it's sort of ready on our minds, but also honestly kind of been wanting to do this for a while. The kind of thing where you start it and you're like, I can't wait for that episode. With that said, today we're going to be covering Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, Sega's puzzle platformer laid fresh onto the Nintendo GameCube in 2003. Oddly enough, this one actually hit North America before Japan. But Grant, why are you laughing? This is serious. We're doing
Dude, I was. I thought you were gonna be like, that's right, X-Arm, baby! We're talking about X-Arm! And then you said...
Grant, what are we doing today?
We're talking about Wonder Egg Priority. Probably, the best show I've seen in a long time. All-around best show. I'll give Deca-Dence its due credit for going the extra mile. I'll give Revu's Starlight for being incredibly shocking, but Wonder Egg Priority is, from top to bottom so far, just an incredible piece of anime media. So Wonder Egg Priority is, it's a magical girl show. It's not, they don't have the outfits, there's no transformation scenes. They get fancy magical weapons that show up in a bunch of light, and then they also fight all the darkness and despair. It's a show still about hope, and they even get their familiars later, but we'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a preview. We've seen up through episode 7 so far, and wanted to talk about it early, and then we'll come back around to review the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is very much going to be a Grant-heavy episode, just because this is special to Grant's heart. It's, we both love this show, but Grant, magnitudes more than me. So I mostly want to open the stage to Grant on this. Give us a recap of the show's premise for those who might not have seen it yet.
So Wonder Egg Priority is about a girl named Auto Ai, or Ai Auto, and she is a shut-in after her friend commits suicide at the school that she goes to. So Auto kind of spends most of her time at home, and she meets these mysterious faceless mannequins, and they give her an egg. And then when she goes to sleep, she awakens in a dream world where she hatches the egg, and it is a girl, and the girl also committed suicide. And they are given the mission to protect the girl throughout this dream world, and if they do, there is hints that this might bring back the person that they care for, the girl that might have, the girl that they committed suicide that is close to the magical girl. And it's fucking good, dude.
Yeah, this is one that comes swinging out the gate. It's not the kind of magical girl show that's going to be very upfront with you. The first episode in particular starts with a lot of splicing and skipping, where it's kind of leaping past details that now Grant and I can fill in, but before, it's almost as if there was footage there that's now missing, and they're just kind of putting it back to back with those cuts taken out. If that's your thing, if you really like that exploration and sort of higher level of mystery, then this is the show for you.
This show has so much of anxiety-inducing moments. Something's wrong. There are moments that are straight up confusing for everyone involved, including the characters. There are hints of dramatic irony of things that we as the audience know that the protagonists don't know. And overall, this show is good. It's serious. It's heavy. But going into it, you're going to find some pretty beautiful stuff that comes out of this. So the show has good music. The animation is incredible at times. The level of detail they have in the way their characters move, even in just some silly scenes, it has so much love that goes into it that I'm always excited for next week. So I think that since we're doing a preview, we have the first 7 episodes on our belt. We've seen the first 7. I feel like we can kind of go step by step and talk about what we think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first episode introduces us to our main character, Alto, who, as I said earlier, is a shut-in girl with heterochromia, which normally to me is a big red flag, because I always find that trope a little but they do it well in this, because it's not some magic power. It's literally just a genetic thing that she's self-conscious about.
She is being subjected to it as a tropey cultural thing, because it's just a real thing that she has, and I think that's interesting.
The first episode focuses on, I can't remember the girl that she protects in the first episode, but you kind of see her start to explore this world, not necessarily understand what's going on. So she starts off in this world, protecting this girl, and the girl that she's protecting at this moment is actually explaining to her the rules. There there is music that is playing, and the person she's protecting has to survive at least through the music. But the person is saved once they defeat what they call the Wonder Killer, who is the manifestation of the trauma that caused these girls to commit suicide. It's pretty heavy, and it's done in a very good way. The first episode, when we were watching it, we weren't entirely sure what to expect. The visuals at first are really beautiful. You see a lot of fun stuff, but up until you get to the dream world, it's pretty slow, pretty vague. But there is one shot in that first episode that just made me, it like sealed the deal. And
it's the elephant in the room, or perhaps the hatchet in the hallway.
You see a girl with a sensor bar over her face holding some hatchets, waving at I and the girl she's protecting, and then she throws it. Now, it's not an incredibly dramatic shot. It's quick, it's fast, it's messy. You see it from the...
And it's not up close. It is, yeah, it's out.
Yeah, you don't follow the axe as it hits the girl. You are watching it fly down the hallway from the perspective of the thrower, and you just watch it fling into this girl's arm. It's so fast, and you're just... It's shocking. And then you get a pretty fun chase scene. That chase scene is one of my favorite animated parts. We get some pretty interesting characterizations by the way they run, and they run differently. And I know that sounds silly, but the detail they have in these two girls just running away from danger, it is good. It's it has some pretty nice bounce. The frames are high. And then the girl explains to I what's gonna happen, you know?
We here at Familiar Territory subscribe to the ideology that, the K-On! Ideology that even the little details speak a lot, such as, how does someone walk, you know? When someone shuffles their feet, or, you know, how close they keep them to the ground as they move, you know, what does that say about them?
Right. Interesting. And this show does it. This show has a pretty good consistency in how it animates the characters. And you learn a little bit more rules about the Wonder Egg realm, and The person that is doing the protecting is functionally immortal in the world. Any wounds they sustain will be cured in the world. But the person that they are protecting can be killed. It's not really made clear so far whether if they're killed permanently and they no longer get a chance to be saved in this world, or if they just go back into the egg. There is a part where it mentions they're having a hard time fighting what they call the Xeno evils, which are the evil minions of the Wonder Killer. And they talk about how just wait it out. But it doesn't really go too far into depth on what actually happens. I don't know if we'll actually see it, but it's a little fun to talk about. But when Ai wakes up out of her dream, the stab wound she had in the dream world is real, so she goes to the hospital. So even though they are immortal in the world, any wounds they sustain will carry over into the real world. So there is a level of actual danger.
Yeah.
The next episode, you meet Nehru Anuma, who is the president of a company.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really clear what she is. It's a little weird. She doesn't have parents, and the girl she's trying to save is her sister. What's interesting is that even though she's introduced in this episode, this isn't her episode. You get to know who she is, and you kind of get the feeling, and Ai is very into making this girl her friend. She's so happy to see someone else going through the same thing, and she's trying so hard to make this girl like her, and the girl just kind of doesn't want to deal anything with her. This episode, Ai tries to protect a gymnast girl in the dream world. But the more important thing is the relationship that Ai and Nehru build up in this episode. And you can see one of the things about this show is there is a level of mystery in why Ai's friend killed herself. She was very close to their teacher, and there's some hints that it might have been sexual abuse, but there's also a lot of the show explicitly talks about it, and we'll mention it once I'm done introducing all the characters in their respective episodes. So the next episode introduces Rika Kawaii, like kawaii because she's so cute, which is what she says all the time. She is a junior idol who told one of her biggest fans that she needed to lose weight and that she was fat, and her biggest fan died of starving herself. It's pretty heavy. There's a lot of fun character interactions with her that kind of carry over into the rest of the episodes, because she kind of comes off as, for the first time she's talking about it, she doesn't seem guilty of what she did to this girl. She keeps talking about how she wants to get her wallet back because this girl kept giving her money when she was a junior idol, but it is revealed that Rika cuts herself. And it's handled in a pretty upfront way. They don't really shy from it. They don't. It's not implied. There's a few scenes where you actually can see the scars before she reveals it, and boy, does it kind of it hits hard. And she talks to herself while she's thinking about cutting, and it's portrayed in such not a positive light, but in such a respectful light.
Yeah.
This show manages to handle the topic of suicide and depression and self-harm in a way that a lot of media in general can't handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the kind of thing I think we need to, like, we're still introducing things, but we should slip this in now. The way I would put it is that it's very descriptive of trauma and suffering and pain, but it's not it is not depicting those things directly. You'll see the aftermath, and depending on your experience with such things, that might be triggering. But most of the time you're not seeing the direct action, save for a few cases. For example, there's a later episode in which Rika is being cut by someone in a way that might, it reflects like self-cutting, in how it's like being done to her. But in the meantime, as each character is working their way through these, traumas, you're not seeing them be exposed to those traumas directly. Even when, for example, looking at stuff with Koito, who is Ai's friend who took her life, it'll do it essentially like the before and after, where you might see, some people are, coming up to bother Koito, or like things are being heard through like the slats in a locker, or stuff like that. So it's taking you away from the direct exposure, but it's not bowing out from the idea that this stuff is happening. And I think it's really well handled. We mentioned this in Zombieland Saga as well, that it's doing that. I think it is happening here, and that's important. I don't know if there's one perfect way to create a show that is about trauma and triggers without actually initiating those. For anyone who might have that, I don't know. I don't think there's like a way where you can just universally get the best of both worlds. But this show gets as close as I've seen in both, like, as you mentioned, being straightforward about it, but also not exposing you to that stimulus.
And
it's impressive.
And the show does a good job at not criticizing it through trustworthy means. There are some characters that will kind of talk shit about it, but they're kind of depicted as scummy or not completely trustworthy. And it kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat.
You kind of know what the show is trying to say, despite what the character says. In the same sense that like an overly cartoony Saturday morning villain shouting at the top of the lungs, like, I'm going to cut down all the trees in the forest, and that's the best thing for capitalism, whatever, clearly what that character is saying is not what the show is trying to say.
Right.
This show doesn't have to be hammy about it, but still makes that clear through, like, subtext and context, which makes the episodes very dense, and, a lot to work through, and almost a little hard to remember in that way. But I think that's also where it's, it's still like sensory in a way. You feel it.
Yeah. And the show also doesn't romanticize it. It's never depicted as like the right thing to do or something that is a positive light. But it also doesn't paint it as like the people that do it are bad. It's very, very well done.
There's one thing I think in episode 7 that might cut a little close to that, but we'll talk about that when we get to that episode.
Right.
Or at least I'll bring it up.
And then the 4th episode introduces Momoe Sawaki, who is the niece of Ai's homeroom teacher. Momoe's girl that she's looking for is one of her friends who made romantic advances towards Momoe and requested like that they be together. Momoe rejected her, and then her friend committed suicide. So Momoe believes that she is the one that has to bring her friend Haruka back. And this episode's interesting. First off, it straight up starts with Momoe trying to protect a girl who the first line of this episode is, I was sexually abused. And it talks about it, it goes into it, and it's heavy. It's very, very real. It talks about the lack of support this girl received, and it's not feel good. It has no sense of look forward and you'll find something good, or there's no justice that's done. It's just sad. But it's handled well. Momoe is fairly androgynous in her appearance. The show doesn't outwardly state it, and I'm not entirely sure if it's going this way, but there's some hints that Momoe might be trans or just suffers from some sort of dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still in a incredibly well-respected way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm pretty sure too there are characters in the show are sort of supporting contractors, I guess. Aka and Aka, who will mention, like, straight up, like, don't think too hard about it. When asking about specifically Momoe and her role in this, in their group of girls. And I feel like that's probably what the show is going to just stick with, is that, like, Momoe's gender identity, and, assigned gender at birth, it's not really important for us to know. That's for Momoe to know, and for us, to not worry about, because that's not critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, the show's being respectful with it. And still raising it as a topic, but what it's focusing on is, like, how does Momoe deal with it, and what comes next, rather than dwelling on, like, don't you want to know how she suffered? How it's not going there.
And Momoe has some pretty fun, like, the thing is that all these characters have trauma. They all have some baggage that is affecting them as people and making them have a fairly rough life. But they're still teenagers, and they still will do goofy teenage shit. And that is where I think the show is incredible. So real quick, it's pretty fun because all the characters have different weapons. And they're like based off real life weapons. Rika's is a little, it's kind of sad. But
Mm-hmm.
Ai has a pen that is like a giant club. People call it a keyblade because it looks, and she holds it like a keyblade. And then Neru has like a sextant. What are those things called that you make circles with?
It's a compass.
A compass, yeah. And it's a gun, and it's sick as shit. Momoe has like a little needle, like a sewing needle. We haven't really delved into too deep on why Neru or Momoe have those. I got hers from the first girl she protected, which is really weird now that I think about it. But I also seems to actually be able. I uses different weapons depending on the girl she's protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about the themes with that later. Rika has razor blades, which is a little upfront, but she throws them and they make a really cool sound. And I'm gonna be honest, her fights are probably the most fun to watch, just because of the way that she's animated.
Mm-hmm. Rika is probably the most confrontational with her own
Mm-hmm.
trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it makes sense that her weapon choice is, or not choice, but the resulting weapon that she's using is very brashly forward as well, right?
Yeah. And I think it fits. I think it kind of fits. I don't know too much about why Neru or Momoe has theirs yet, but to me, Rika and Ai's fit their character. Rika's pretty upfront. You're right, with her trauma, with what she's dealing with, and then Ai's whole entire purpose is that she wants friends. Koito, her friend that committed suicide,
was her first and only friend until she met these girls. You get to see these pieces of flashback of how she dealt with Koito and how she was, and it is so good. The first episode introduces you to Koito, and like their relationship just seems so... It doesn't seem particularly healthy from the get-go. You never really see them have a good time. You always see Koito being bullied and I kind of sitting in the background. But you feel this kind of understanding between these two girls, and it's so short. It is not most of the show. But the small subtleties in their movements, the way that they act, it's really good. And it's a fun show.
But we probably should get through the rest of the episode.
Yes. Episode 5 is a pretty slow episode. I'm not entirely... I don't even think they do any Wonder Egg fighting in this episode. They might do a little bit, but this episode is basically them just kind of hanging out together. I invite everybody to... Oh, no, wait.
Is it the Nehru sniper episode, or is that episode 6?
This
is what I mean, where like it's easy to kind of forget things about this show because... That's
episode 6 is the Nehru episode. No, wait. I think episode 5 is the Nehru episode, right? But that's the only Wonder Egg you see, and it's cut in between them hanging out. That's right.
Yeah.
But
it is kind of difficult to put this show in order sometimes because it's a lot.
It is a lot.
But it has its downtime, but all that downtime is just chock full of like important character discussions that are like unpacking things very gently.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy to kind of get out of sorts. You'll usually remember like the enemy of the episode for the most part. But yeah, it's there's a lot to handle here.
But yeah, in this episode, in the episode where they just hang out, there really isn't much to it, but you get to see them having fun. You get to see them enjoying their time, just being girls. They actually, I think this is the episode where Rika suggests that they stop trying to bring their friends back to life. And it's a pretty hard topic, but she basically says, what if we die doing this? Then it's in vain. We have friends now. We have each other. And they have fun. And there's a scene where they're in a bowling alley together, and it might be one of my favorite scenes in the show. Because they're eating food, and the two mannequins that are hanging out watching them do all this stuff basically say, hey, buy eggs and leave. And Rika and I and Momoe basically say, we're hanging out and this is basically group therapy. Fuck off, let us bowl. And then they just have fun. This episode made me miss hanging out with my friends. And it was weird because it kind of sent me back to the time that when we were teenagers and we were hanging out at your house and just sitting around and talking about our problems.
Venting and talking about Soul Eater and then venting some more and then somehow we get back to Soul Eater again.
It's weirdly nostalgic for a time that, I haven't been a teenager for 6 years now, right? And you kind of miss it, and it kind of makes you miss that. And that episode...
This episode is basically to say, hey, like, all that action stuff is important, but you can't compartmentalize that unless you have some time and space.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what we miss, is having, like, no, we're not working constantly, we're not worried about paycheck to paycheck. We were in a time and place where we could just, like, legitimately soak in whatever it was we wanted to talk about and feel without having the overhanging guilt of, I have something to solve. There's something coming up that I have to work through. That kind of thing. It was just the moment. And that's what this episode is. I appreciate that.
It was really good. And we get a little bit more into Nehru's background. You find out that her sister fucking stabbed her and then killed herself. And she doesn't know why. So there's this kind of complex reasoning for her quest, right? Everyone else, Rika feels guilty about Cherami, her fan's death. I wants to know what caused Koito's suicide, and then Momoe also feels guilty about Haruka's death. But Nehru is just like, yeah, I don't know what happened. And you get some actual, like, we've talked about this before in our Review Starlight episode, where you can do nudity in a way that's not sexual, and this show does a good job, because you just see these scars that Nehru has on her back, and it is intense, and I'm gonna say this a lot, it's heavy. The show, it doesn't shy away from the amount of trauma that these girls are having, but you also get one of the coolest wonder killers, because during this time you're seeing Nehru fight on a bridge, which is where her sister committed suicide, and that's kind of one of the things that the show talks about. Everyone's place where they fight is kind of parallel to what caused them, how they killed themselves. Momoe fights in a train station. Ai fights in the school. Nehru fights on the bridge that her sister jumped off of. And then Rika fights in a big empty field because Cherami died of starving to death, essentially. And one of the things that I've picked up, we'll talk about the thin themes, actually, because I think that's going to be, this might have one of our longest themes.
Just talk about it now. I honestly kind of want to save themes, like the big stuff, for like our actual review anyways. So
okay.
Whatever's on your mind now, let's just go ahead and get it out. This is going to be a stream of consciousness episode.
And I kind of want to, you're right. Let's kind of push away themes for this episode. We'll talk about what we kind of think of, but I feel like what we should talk about is where we want the show to go instead. But all the girls that they're protecting seem to have something to do with who they are as people. Ai's girls that she protects always have something to do with being either bullied or ostracized. Rika's girls that she always deals with are fanatics of some sort. Momoe's girls that she always takes care of seem to be have some sort of sexual abuse or some sort of like gender crisis. And then Nehru, we only see her have two. One we don't really know too much about, and the other one had to do with her physical appearance and growing older. But that's it. So I think there is a tie to the girls that they are chosen to protect and who they are as people. Boy, is this show good.
This show cares a lot.
It does.
If it's not clear yet,
And then you have the next episode, which is episode 6, episode 6, which is the episode where they get their familiars. There's not there's not like a ton of character growth in this episode, but you do find out that Ai's mom, who is a single mother, is dating her teacher now, and Ai is not happy with this. And this is the episode that kind of starts to play into the fact where the audience thinks that it's sexual abuse. There's a lot of scenes where it's just Koito and their teacher, or it seems that Koito's being very close to this teacher, and it seems weirdly inappropriate, but we only see little moments of it, and it's almost all assumed, right? Like, you'll see them hugging in a classroom while Koito's crying, or you'll see Koito go off with the teacher in the background.
Yeah, we only know what I knows at this point, and that's to say not a lot.
Yes. And in this episode, the girls talk about why Koito might have committed suicide, and they basically say what everyone was theorizing, that the teacher and her had a relationship, which is a super weird thing to do if you're trying to like, without confirming anything. Saying that halfway through the series seems like a red herring, or kind of like a poke at the people that are theorizing about the show.
Mm-hmm. It certainly makes sense in fiction, that these characters would follow up into that thought.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like, oh, the characters are being written to give a clue. It feels like this is naturally what everyone would assume, as we were assuming. And it's both kind of, it is what you're describing, but it's also a little gut-wrenching too. Just like, ooh, yeah, this is
it's real.
Interesting spot we're in.
It's real.
Yeah.
And it's good. And then the last episode that we watched, episode 7, was heavy. Holy shit. I think episode 7 is probably the heaviest episode this show has. It's another Rika-centric episode. It starts off with her birthday, and her mom told her that she would tell her who her dad is when, and she doesn't know. She doesn't know who Rika's dad is, or her biological dad. She knows that there was a man that was with them when Rika was a child, but it might not be her biological dad. And Rika relapses in this episode. I held my breath this entire episode. You get a pretty nice moment where I and Rika are talking about what it's like to come from single parent households. They kind of have this nice little connection. And then you're watching one of Rika's fights in the Wonder Egg world. And so the girl she's protecting was someone who committed suicide because she was in a cult. And the Wonder Killer is the cult leader who's trying to convince Rika to just let him kill her because she's weak and useless. And I thought it was, at this time I thought it was it. I was like, oh fuck, this is the episode, right? But in episode 6, where they got their familiars, they were told that they would imprint on them, and she gets saved by her giant turtle named Manon. And boy, did that part make me so fucking hype, where you see him come in and save her life. Oh, so good. And it's good. It's and
yeah.
It ends with her eating the cake that her mom got her for her birthday, and her mom is drunk because she's a bartender and got drunk after work, and was basically feeling sad because her daughter resented her, and she says, "You're gonna leave me one day, aren't you?" And Rika says, "Yeah, I am, but not now." And she goes, "I see." And the episode ends. And there's some lines in this episode that I think are a little weird. But I know you had stuff to talk about it, so you talk about it first.
Okay, yeah.
I've been talking for like 5 minutes straight.
That's perfectly fine. You've got great things to say, and this show is important to you. It's important to me too. Yeah, this show has some heavy hitters. this episode is like a concentration of that. Maybe it's just because it's also the episode I've seen the most. But regardless, you know, I want to call attention to a couple things. First, some positives. This episode is a great example of how these characters are allowed to have a range of emotions, but not feel inconsistent. In fact, I want to dig into Ai's character a little bit more later. Because at times it can, like, if you're just sort of jumping around or reading a synopsis of who these characters are, then sometimes their behaviors will seem out of place, or it's just like, they should not be this happy. They have a bad life. Why is this going on? But I think the show is able to deliver on that in a reasonable way to say, like, look, people are you know, prone to have, you know, bursts of happiness or, you know, a sense of fulfillment or joy in what is otherwise like a sea of darkness. Sometimes that's part of a coping mechanism. Sometimes it's a form of, you know, maturity and well-adjustment that has to sort of come before the curve. And Rika is the character who's like expressing that the most readily. I think all the characters have those fluctuations that, you know, are conveyed very realistically. But that's like kind of Rika's whole thing, is her two sides. You know, this episode in particular will have, you know, the high points of Papa no Five Kado, you know, where she essentially deals out the photographs of her potential fathers as if they were, you know, like a poker hand. You know, that's very funny and very sad at the same time. But that's part of how Rika lives. It doesn't feel out of place. You know, when she's also, you know, becoming vulnerable to the Wonder Killer, and its statements about, like, you know, just give up. That also doesn't seem like a far cry from what, you know, Rika would experience. You know, this was something like hinted towards a little bit in episode 5 when she brings up, why are we doing this? You know, these characters, you know, experience highs and lows, and it's still handled in such a way that feels like it's centered. It's tough to watch sometimes. Maybe at the surface level feels inconsistent, but I'm going to ask that anyone who's listening and feels that way, keep watching or maybe rewatch an episode. It's a tall ask, but I do think it's worth it. I do think that it comes through, you know, it essentially proves itself on those grounds.
Mm-hmm.
There is one rough patch in this episode, you know, and that would be that when Rika's sort of getting her second wind in her fight against the Wonder Killer, she does say something along the lines of, like, you know, I'll cut, you know, I'll keep cutting if that'll get me by. At least that's how I read into it. You know, I don't know if that's like, maybe I'm misremembering it a little bit, but it just kind of took me back as like, oh, you know, that I kind of wish that Rika wouldn't say that, but not because I don't think she would say it, just because it's like the moralistic thing of like, no, don't recommend cutting, you know. But that's a hard truth here, that's the stage Rika's at right now.
Right.
That when she's sincerely that close in suicidal ideation, then, you know, that's what she's clinging to. Breaks my heart, but, you know, that's real. And that's also then, you know, if that's a sensitive subject for you, then know that exists in the show, and you're going to see that, you know, and be warned. It's in the latter half of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think it's handled well. I will stand by that.
I think the way that I read into it was more, and maybe I am just reading way into it. I was kind of under the impression that it was more of I probably will relapse again, because it's not always easy to keep a constant improvement.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I won't hate myself for relapsing.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that that's what they were going for, but at the same time, you're right. The way that at least it's dubbed, or not dubbed, the sub is a little meh. Especially with some of the things that Uraraka and Aka, the two mannequins, said. But this episode also shows, because it zooms out, and it shows you what Uraraka and Aka are seeing, and to them it looks like a video game. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah.
So I don't trust anybody that gives girls magical powers in shows anymore. I always think there's some ulterior motive. It's just, the state of the magical girl genre post 2010.
Yeah, if anyone gives you a pink cell phone that's like bedazzled and has like a card reader on it, then get the fuck out. You're in trouble.
So I was kind of I kind of feel that obviously there's something going on there. But with that, that's about all we have. I do want to point out. I do want to drop some staff names here, because I think the staff in this show is incredible. So first things first, the music in this show, tight as hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonky. It's kind of surreal. It has some weird vocalizations that aren't really anything. It's good, and the person that is behind it is the musician Dede Mouse. Dede Mouse. This is the only anime they've worked on. But he is a DJ. Like, he has albums. He has songs you can go check out. He's been doing it since like 2007. So he has stuff. And he's really good. The show has some whimsical, kind of happy, upbeat things when upbeat things are happening. And it doesn't really have too much like sad music. But boy, does it just make you like what's going on.
Yeah, this show is not going to break out the violins on you very often, but I think it's better for it. It kind of like chokes up on the bat and says, all right, this is the sad part. This is where the characters are dealing with something big, and you don't get your Hans Zimmer to sort of tell you how to feel right now. You have to kind of sit with it. You have to sit with these characters and feel that through.
Weirdly enough, the director of the show, I believe this is his first time ever directing an entire show. So big props for him on that. He hasn't done too much. He's been the director of some episodes of Attack on Titan. He storyboarded a couple of Ore Monogatari episodes. He also was the director of a couple of Eromanga Sensei episodes, which is stupid, because that's not a good show. But I think he's doing good in whatever he's doing, and the director. Fujiti Akiko is the sound director of this show. And he is pretty damn good. He was also the sound director of Majo no Tabi Tabi, Journey of Elena. Great.
It's night and day. Holy cow.
Yeah, he seemed to put a lot more work into this.
Or maybe just had better material, better team to work with here too.
And then I want to give big shout outs to Shinji Nojima, the writer of this show. So he is the one that wrote the entire thing. And his birthday was 2 days ago. Congratulations to him.
Happy birthday.
But he wrote a couple manga. That's about it. This is his first anime. According to some...
And this is anime original.
Yes. So fucking good on him. Apparently, some of his manga deal. One of his manga is a sort of a LGBTQ gender dysphoria and sexuality manga about two guys that just kind of like each other. And then he has other manga that deal with sexual abuse. So he apparently has, I mean, and I've done some research, everything that he's done. I haven't read any of it, but apparently he's pretty consistent on the whole taking things seriously when it comes to stuff like this. He did a lot of he's mostly known for his TV dramas. But other than that, first time doing anime, and boy is he good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This kind of product doesn't happen by accident, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of things coming together. So we have a script that works really well into storyboards. Storyboards are, you know, pulling their work underneath, you know, directors and producers, and the music is tying well to that. You know, like this stuff takes an immense amount of work to get right. And for this to be a pretty fresh composition of a team, you know, I from what I recall, like this particular, you know, studio formation has not been around for very long at all.
It's Cloverworks. So Cloverworks was a subset studio of A1 Pictures, and then they
got the fuck out of there.
They left. They have done Slow Start, which is apparently a pretty fun slice of life show. They were a co-production. They were their initial, after Slow Start, their big thing that kind of sent them past where they past like the A1 Pictures studio, is that they were the co-production of Darling in the Franxx, which maybe I'm not a big fan of the story, but it does have some pretty impressive animation. But I mean, they also had Trigger on board for that one. But then they were responsible for the Persona 5 the animation, which I think is a really good pick for the studio, because they do have that kind of stylish, like almost like photorealistic stuff at times. Mm-hmm. And then they did Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, which is a pretty damn good show from what I've heard. The big thing that they've been doing recently, they actually are doing The Promised Neverland right now, and Horimiya, which is also airing right now. So, and apparently Horimiya is doing really good. I think Cloverworks started in 2018, and damn, have they just kind of done it. They do so much good shit.
Yeah. The one thing I worry about hearing that is that they're overworking themselves. I sincerely hope they're not. That would be the reason why I'd hope they'd be far and away from A1 Pictures, because they are a studio stretched thin. So Cloverworks out there, I hope you can take your time, and I understand that really no matter how I pin this, the Japanese anime industry is underpaid and underappreciated for what it does, but let's hope that changes, because you all deserve better.
Yeah.
With a product like this,
Yeah.
and even so, make bag products. Fine, you still deserve better than what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sidebar done. Back to it.
Yeah. So check out Wonder Egg Priority if you haven't. If you for some reason listen to all these spoilers, there are a couple of truly like shocking scenes and like the good sense. In terms of just action, there are some insanely good fight animations. There's also just some really good character animations. I don't want to go through and list all the good shit that I've seen, but I've seen this show so many fucking times. Anytime that anyone misses out, because we're watching it with like 4 or 5 of our friends, and there are some of our friends that are watching the show that aren't normally into this kind of show, and they are loving it.
Yeah. This show, I feel like, is the kind of thing where it's like you had to be there, where it doesn't matter how much we explain it. We could tell you every little plot detail. You could go read the full synopsis on wherever, but watching it in action is a totally different thing. us telling you, oh, there's this part in the first episode where does a big attack, she does a big jump, and she's, nah, I'm mad, and she one-shots the Wonder Killer, and it explodes. And then she looks over at the girl she saved, and she looks back at her, and they just have this, like, oh, face. And it's great, it's well-timed, but I could tell you that a million times, and it will not take away the enjoyment of actually seeing it.
Oh, yeah.
Its execution, lands that in a way that remains special. But I actually have a question then to ask because of where this conversation's going. Do you think that this is a good entry point into the magical girl genre?
Ooh. So far, yes, I do. Because you don't need to know too much about magical girl tropes. There's no I don't have a husband teacher, and there's no monochrome. Well, okay, the characters do have a monochromatic outfits to them, but they are just their regular clothes. Which I think is neat. They don't have like full transformations, at least not yet.
They've got signature colors, but yeah, they've made the joke of like when are they going to go pick out their outfits, but it's not happened yet,
or it might not happen. But that's what we're there's some tropes that are fun, but it kind of leads you into the whole, hey, at the core of it, all magical girl shows are about helping people and hope. And I think this show is about that. And I kind of want to talk about where I want this show to go.
Yeah.
So, like I said, no hypotheticals today. We'll talk about themes once the show finishes.
We can talk a little about themes, but like I am gonna save my my biggest brain stuff for when we've seen the whole ordeal, right?
Yeah.
And I say biggest brain with like the most self-undercutting tone I could possibly conjure here. Anyways, yeah, let's talk.
So, one of the things that I think that this show will have, I think the final Wonder Egg will be every single one of them will get one of their the people that they're trying to save. I don't think they'll get their own. I think we're going to see some kind of dives into how these characters who are actually trying to help these people were responsible in one, not responsible, you're never responsible for someone's suicide, but
involved in or tied,
yes,
tethered to these situations.
I think we're going to see a little bit more of that. I think with Rika, we already know that her comment to share me was what sent her to starve herself, right? But I think we're going to see Koito talk about how I didn't help her when she was being bullied. I think we'll see a little bit more about that stuff, and I think we're going to get a pretty heavy episode. I don't think they're going to come back to life. This show is a lot about trauma, and the show is about dealing with it in a healthy and realistic way, despite the show being pretty wild. I don't think any of the characters are going to die because of that theme. Also, I think if they were going to die, it would have been last episode. But I think this show is going to be how these characters are going to deal with their trauma and how this whole experience ties into that. I think that they're going to get to talk to the people that they are trying to save. And I think that's going to kind of be what they get out of this. I think they're going to I think they're kind of going to talk about they're going to be able to work with it. And I think it's going to be about how to not deal with your trauma necessarily or get over it, but how to live with it. And I think that's why I don't think anyone's gonna die. I think that this show wants to talk about how people live with their trauma. But yeah, I will say I don't want to talk about it too much right now. But I have been following the Reddit discussions, and I'm trying to find one of their posts. But there is someone on the subreddit who's talking deep about the flower language of this show, because this show loves its flowers, and I'll brush up on the stuff they posted, and I'll credit them. So there, the user Supika on Reddit has been talking about flower language and how what they represent in each of their characters, and it seems a lot more in detailed for it to be a coincidence, considering that they talk about this every single week. But I just wanted to kind of mention that.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about it once we get to that. What do you want to see with this show?
Honestly, I don't want all the answers.
Yeah.
I think I'd be very happy with this show not going out of its way to give any kind of pseudoscience. I don't want an explanation of, what this world actually means or who created it. I don't want to know the metaphysics of the situation. I want it to stay as brazen as it is right now. Similarly, I feel like, when it comes to, like, will the girls get saved or not, my mind actually doesn't sit in that space very often when I'm in this show. I feel like it cares so much more about just, what's happening in the liveliness of what it is. And so I think I am ready for more of that. I think I'll probably feel pretty done with it when we're hitting episode 12. I don't expect that I'll want a second season out of this, not because I don't think it would be good, but just because I think that it's really convinced me that this is the kind of thing that comes to a close. And one that they'll manage within this amount of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are definitely some mysteries that I want to be that I want solved, because I'm like that. But yeah, I don't think I want too much to be revealed. I want to know what Akka and Ura-Akka are up to. But I don't want to know, like, anything else. I just want to know their motives. I want to know the mysteries that are surrounding the characters' deaths. But yeah, I don't see the show getting a second season. And I don't think it needs it. It seems to... It is what it is, right? And I think that with the way that the writer has done things, I don't see any reason to go further. As long as it ends with a good note, unless it, like, ends on some weird, huge cliffhanger for no reason, which I don't see it doing, I can totally be okay with this show having one season.
Yeah. Now, are there any looming fears that you have with the story?
Oh, you know
or
it.
with the production?
You know it. I don't want this show to drop the ball on itself.
In what ways?
I think over explaining it could really, really hurt this show.
Yeah, I don't want a Yuki Yuna.
Yeah, I don't want a Yuki Yuna. I agree. I think if this show just, like, did a whole, like, 11 episode, like a full episode, just exposition of Ura-Akka and Akka are beings from another universe who feed off girls' hope, which is, it's what it is. And I don't want them to I kind of don't want them to go against Uraraka and Akka. I think them being portrayed as kind of shitty and not trustworthy is fine, but I don't think that them being like the be all end all villains is something that I want to see.
Yes. I don't care for them as masterminds.
Yes.
I just want them to be essentially. I'm glad that they are involved because it raises questions and it gives us like an anchor point, but I do not care for like the mwahaha potential. I'll be happy if they don't go there.
I actually think this show would be significantly worse if it kills any of its main characters.
Agreed.
I think that the last episode, if the last episode is where they would have had to do it, and they didn't, and once that moment passed, I'm like, none of these characters can die, because that episode hit so hard on, moving forward and bettering yourself every day, even if it's a little bit. And I think killing any of the characters would kind of throw a wrench in this show. I think that if any character is on the chopping block, it's Nehru. But I don't think this show wants to kill its characters, and I don't think it's going to. But I feel like the show would be significantly worse if it did that, because the show doesn't need to cheapen itself to that. Not to say that character deaths are necessarily cheap, but this show has so much more going for it than just mortality, right?
Yeah, and as you've mentioned, thematically, it makes a whole lot of sense that these characters are on a trajectory to live on with what they've endured and against what they've endured. And I like that. I vibe with that theme.
I do want to see I do want to see another team up episode. We only got one episode where the girls were in the same area. And I think that episode was incredibly fun.
What about a finale where they're all in the same world?
I think I would dig that. I think I would dig that, where they were all in the same world and they all had the people that they were trying to protect. I think that would be a very good way to kind of hit home this idea of trauma and acceptance together with both their friends of the past and their friends of now. I actually think that would be the best finale idea.
Yeah. And how about a colliding of worlds where all the dream worlds are kind of like merged together? PlayStation All-Stars style. Sorry, spoilers for PlayStation All-Stars if you've never played it on the PlayStation 3.
All 6 of our PlayStation All-Star players in the world will never watch this episode. But yeah, I think the show has a lot going for it. I've moved from cautiously optimistic to cautiously pessimistic. I am now very optimistic about this show. I think this is going to stick the landing and it's going to be incredible and phenomenal. But there is this ever creeping doubt now that this show's going to drop the fucking ball.
That's what happens when you're up high,
Yeah, and that's not to say that it will. I mean, there's plenty of shows that are consistently incredible throughout, but we've been hit hard. We've had disappointments.
For example, one half of this podcast.
But yeah,
which one of us is it? You decide. Cast your votes. Who do you want voted off the podcast?
But yeah, so that's really all I have to say about the first half of Wonder Egg Priority.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions I have in terms of like, what's your favorite weapon and stuff like that. But like, I think we should save that for the last, for the finale of this, when we can bring it all together. Right. There's still time for this stuff to grow.
So I did look it up. The last episode that has aired when we've recorded this was episode 8, which is a recap episode that kind of talks a little bit about the rules of the show. But from what I've heard, it's like almost 100% recap. From what I've read, this show only has 11 episodes. not including the recap episode. So 12 episodes as the series, but only 11 episodes that aren't the recap. So we still have, as of now, at least 4 more episodes.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot in 4 episodes. That's almost 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, do you have anything left to say about episodes 1 through 7?
I don't, but I would like to kind of just end things off here by, I don't know, being a little vulnerable and, trying to do what this show does and put forward a good message. If you happen to be out there listening to this and, you've been questioning things, if you're, familiar with suicidal ideation, if you're in a point where you are looking forward and it seems like you can't see a way through, where there's just like a wall of darkness and, the possibilities that other people try to describe to you are not visualizing, then, I do recommend, reach out to people, seek help. If not someone then someone you don't, across a hotline. There are text numbers that you can text to if you're not comfortable making a call, just to send just a little thing that might help you keep a grip on the world. It's sometimes difficult to face the idea that there will ever be anything better than what you've got now, because we're in a bad place, and some of us in a worse place than others. But ultimately, I believe in a reality in which existing through it gives you the infinite potential to find something better than where you're at now. That you'll find moments of levity, that you'll connect with someone you didn't expect to, that you will survive in spite of what has been dealt to you, and that you will be able to find something better beyond that. I know that words only mean so much, and that we can't exactly, recommend the show as therapy. But in case resources are slim and you're looking for anything to tell you otherwise, this is our calling out to you, to take care of yourself, and please do believe that there's a reason to stick around. Shows like this don't get made without the understanding that, and the experience that things will turn over. And so, I guess that's really what I wanted to impart in this last leg of this. A little bit of a PSA from someone who's been there to maybe someone who's there now. And with that, we're looking forward to seeing where the rest of the show goes. Grant, would you like to take us away with any last thoughts, or to, our usual ending stinger?
Yeah, well, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that you're doing all right in this kind of weird world that we live in. If you liked what you listened to, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter, where you get to hear me tweet absolute insane bullshit for no reason throughout my day.
There is a reason, Grant. It helps us all live on.
And check out our My Anime list if you want to see kind of a recap of everything that we've talked about. Or don't. We are not two mannequins toying with your lives.